Welcome to Bucharest.
Thank you.
You're one of the most appreciated ensemble in the world. You were founded 30 years ago and you play together for almost 20 years. Why did you choose this name, Schubert?
Well, as you say, I joined the group 20 years ago, and by which time they'd already been going 10 years. So the story goes that it was a group of friends that wanted to get together just to do one concert, and they wanted to play Schubert's Trout Quintet. And so trying to think of a name, the most obvious name for a group to form to play the Trout Quintet was the Schubert Ensemble. So they chose that name, and the story goes that they never realized that it would go even 1 year, let alone 30 years. So it's a great name to have, the Schubert Ensemble, but out of about 120 pieces in the repertoire, we have 4 by Schubert. So it's slightly unfair.
It is. So, but you like to play pieces that are neglected by the history of music. Among them, you have Enescu's pieces. When and how did you fall in love with Enescu?
It started actually, the suggestion to come and play here in 2005 for the Enescu Festival, and we were asked to play the second piano quartet. And this was obviously a few years before that date, and so we started to program it, and we just fell in love with this language. It was something unlike anything we'd ever heard, and we performed it quite a lot and just grew to love it. So since then we've played a lot more in Enescu. After that one we learned the first quartet that we're playing here on Saturday, and we recorded those 2, and we've recently recorded another disc with piano quintet and piano trio.
I want to know Enescu through the eyes of a foreigner musician, because everybody loves him here, but they don't always know why. What do you love most about Enescu?
I think there are so many things to love about Enescu. When we first started playing, particularly the second piano quartet, it was a musical world that we'd never come across before. It's almost like he's never heard any other music. He's reinvented music somehow, and it just takes you to incredible atmospheric places that you've never really imagined. There's this very strong sort of sense of folk music in the background, particularly in the later music. It's very much in the background, but I think that helps to create this very, very strong atmosphere, very, very strong language. And because it was so new to us, I think we were just enamored with it. We fell in love with it.
Enescu wrote this quartet when he was 28. He was already acclaimed by the public. Do you sense a virtuosity, spectacular in this music? Because he was on the stage all the time at that time.
I think virtuosity is a good word, because there's virtuosity in the writing, in the composition of it, but also virtuosity in the playing. It's extremely virtuoso writing for all 4 of us. It's got millions of notes, I mean more notes than almost anything we've ever played, and that's, I guess, is what I mean by the virtuosity in the writing. He somehow pulls that all together into a kind of cogent whole, and it's incredibly exuberant, incredibly exciting and passionate writing. It's amazing to play, and I think it's quite a journey for the audience to go on. We've done various talks on this piece, in fact, to try and explain it to the audience before they hear it, because I think it can be quite overwhelming on a first hearing. And the more we look at it, the more we realise that the material is very, very concise. And so there's actually an incredible economy of ideas that he just reworks and reworks and reworks, and it sounds like a sort of constant stream of invention. And actually it's almost academically worked out with incredible brilliance, and you'd never hear it. But when you start to see the connections right across the movements, you'll hear a tune in the 4th movement that's a relative of the very opening of the 1st movement. And it just shows what an incredible brain he had. I mean, it's almost impossible to conceive that he imagined this whole thing, but it looks like he had possibly the whole thing in his head before he wrote it down.
And actually he wrote everything down. Do you feel that he wanted to control everything?
Yeah, actually it's funny, a phrase we've sometimes used when talking about Enescu is control freak, which sounds rude, but actually I think it shows that he has this incredible care for what comes out. And I think as a violinist I find it very interesting, because he writes a lot of very violin-y markings in the violin parts, particularly in the later music. There's a lot of fingerings, and he tells you which strings to play on all the time, when to use an open string, when to do a glissando, and almost everything you could think of doing yourself has been instructed in the part. And in fact that ends up meaning you have to do a lot more practice, not just learning the notes and the dynamics, but also all of these extra technical markings. And I wonder if what comes out in the end is sounding like he would have played it, which is a very nice idea.
Yeah, but you'll play Enescu only in the second half. The first half you'll play Frank Bridge and Fauré. Actually, Frank Bridge is a composer, an English composer, who was only 2 years older than Enescu, and Fauré was his teacher. Did you choose these works in order to frame Enescu's music?
Absolutely, yeah. And the festival here were keen that we had music written around the same time. So the Frank Bridge is only 1 year later than the Enescu quartet, and so that puts it into context very nicely. And Fauré and Enescu of course go well together, not just because they have this very special relationship, but musically they fit well together. There's a lot of Fauré's influence in Enescu's writing, and particularly in the earlier works like this first quartet.
Yeah, it's a very romantic music, as I heard both of them, and maybe they're in the same way as passionate and romantic. That's what I sense.
I think that's right, and they're both very exuberant pieces, very uplifting pieces, and I think they fit well together for that reason as well.
Yeah, they were very young, both of them, when they wrote it.
That's right, young, passionate men.
That's true. You're also a soloist, you play with orchestras, you teach, so you know all the faces of a musician. What are the joys that only the chamber music can bring you?
I think, for me, one of the nicest things about chamber music is that you can pace the development of repertoire in your own way. So we've played together, since I've been in the group, nearly 20 years. And the Enescu quartet we're playing today, we've been working on for years. And we can rehearse it as much as we like, we can perform it as many times as possible. And there's no other medium really where you have that level of control over how much you work on a piece, how many times you perform it, and pacing that up to a concert like Saturday or to a recording. And I think that's what makes chamber music special for me, apart from, of course, the sort of intimacy of the relationships with your colleagues.
That's why I wanted to say, I love about chamber music the familiarity what you have between your colleagues. It's very democratic. I love the rehearsals. You can say what you think and all the colleagues come together and you do together music. It's easier. Is that true what you feel too? Yes,
ideally that's always what happens. Of course every group has its disagreements and conflicts along the way, but I think a group like us that's been together for so long generally has to be pulling in the same direction, otherwise it would splinter. And I think we do work very well together. We understand each other and the way we function, and we enjoy sort of building repertoire together and travelling together. We eat together, which not all quartets do. We travel together and we generally have a pretty good time.
I know that you had your 30 years anniversary and you played Enescu. Is Enescu right now, in this moment, representative for your quartet?
Yeah, I think it's become very important to us. We try to do various different things with our repertoire. There is, of course, what we call our core repertoire, which would be Schubert, Schumann, Fauré, Dvorak. And of course, that's what audiences instinctively want to hear. We have commissioned a lot of music, partly because we have a double bass player as one of the founder members of the group, and the repertoire there was fairly limited. So right from the beginning of the group, we started commissioning, and we've now got over 45 commissions. And then in between these two kind of extremes, we found it incredibly rewarding to sort of uncover music that we feel has been neglected or forgotten about. And there's been various composers along the way that we've kind of championed in that way. Some composers, of course, that everybody knows, like Fauré, but there are two late piano quintets, that are very rarely played, that are almost masterpieces. And there were a few years where we played those a lot and recorded those. And from there it was almost a logical step to Enescu.
Is that important to you, to be here in Romania playing Enescu in the Enescu Festival?
Yeah, there's nowhere more important to play Enescu for us. It's been now, how many years, sort of 8 or 9 years that we've been working on Enescu, and it's a wonderful reward to come and play it here to Romanians, to hear the appreciation for their music, and to play in this wonderful hall, the Athenaeum. It's a treat.
You know that Enescu actually played very much on this stage, and actually he contributed to the payment of the organ.
Did he?
There, yeah, he was really involved. He conducted there, so I think it's the perfect place to be.
Well, we're bringing it to its sort of spiritual home, so it's really nice, and it's very nice for us. We're not Romanian, of course, so it's wonderful for us to be welcomed and accepted here in sort of Enescu's home.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you.